Hey, vegan cyclist. Today we're going to talk about how your fitness will develop over time. This is important. This is something I've been thinking about because when you first start out and you're at the base of Mount Olympus, where Peter Sagan and Chris Froome are the gods staring down at us mere mortals, it gets really discouraging on when we look at where we are or when you look at yourself and say, man, I am so not fit compared to even people just around me. You will probably ride with people where you go, there's no possible way in a million years I could do what that person did, power-wise or distance-wise or time-wise. Because we can only see so far into the future. We can only see so far up that mountain. So if we can better understand how our fitness is going to develop through just also training programs and how we train and how we ride and how we stress our system, it will give us a better idea of what is in store for the future and keep us motivated. So let's get into it. How does your fitness develop over time? Look, everyone's fitness is going to develop in a different way based on your genetics and your muscle fiber and the way you train and how much dedication you have. So I'm going to boil this down into some pretty simple ideas. So just you know what I mean? Take it for what it's worth, but sometimes we need to just boil down to the simplest ideas to better grasp the whole thing. I'm going to talk about how your fitness is going to develop in different metrics on how you train and how you ride, and also how your power profile will develop based on your muscle fiber. So I want to break this down into 5 different metrics. One is your skill. Now, skill isn't necessarily that important with cycling. It's very fitness-based, but knowing how the group rides, knowing how to get on someone's wheel, knowing how to be efficient, pedal stroke, changing muscle groups around, even just having knowledge of how your body reacts to certain stresses is definitely a skill and an experience that can be obtained. So that's our first metric, is your experience. When this bar is depleted, you then start using your other metrics, which the other one is strength. Strength is like muscle strength, pushing on the pedals hard. Even if you come from another sport, this may not absolutely be something you have. You could come from like a weightlifting background and still your muscles aren't really honed in for cycling. So then there's strength, but then there's also your cardio. This is like your anaerobic. So like strength is like zone 1 to 3 and then zone 4 to 6, as your cardio. Now, these metrics are going to be turned on or off based on intensity. When the intensity is low, we don't usually utilize our anaerobic motor, our cardio motor. We're more utilizing our muscle strength. But when the intensity is high, we're not usually using a ton of muscle strength. We're using more of our upper end, our lungs, our heart. So we have skill and strength and cardio and intensity, and the 5th metric is going to be your life bar. This is basically kind of overall fitness. Everything combined, your ability to suffer, your mental state, right? So this is like your health bar. And as these start to deplete, all these different metrics deplete, you then start to eat into your health bar. And when the health bar is done, you're cracked, you're blown up, you're out the back. I hope that wasn't too confusing. So, a lot of graphics here. So let's talk about in the first 30 days of you riding a bike. And let's just talk like you're coming from no other background. This is the first time you've ever started riding. You're probably going to have 0 in your skill, okay? And maybe 1 in your strength and 1 in your cardio. And your whole life bar is probably not that great, right? You're pretty low on life just to begin with. So as soon as you go out, you have no experience to bank on. You're low intensity and you run out of strength and your legs start blowing up and they hurt. And then if you do go of any sort of intensity, you just don't have the cardio to even sustain it anywhere. So then your heart blows up. So then you run out of those levels and then you don't have much to bank on in your just overall fitness. So then you run out of that right away. So you're like 10, 20 miles and your legs are hurting, your lungs are screaming. You're like, oh my goodness. Now this is your baseline, okay? So let's talk about what if you just ride by yourself with no one and do big rides at low intensity? Well, over the next year, your fitness is going to develop in a way like this. Your skill level isn't going to increase very much, maybe a tiny bit just on road knowledge, like local roads and how, where the climbs are and how long they are and that sort of thing. But you're not really riding in groups. You're not really doing a whole lot to learn. You're just riding. And if you're riding by yourself, for the most part, you're probably riding a whole lot in lower intensity. Even if you feel like it's high intensity, if you don't have a power meter or anything to measure that, most likely your overall intensity level is going to be more on the strength side. So then your strength bar is going to increase quite a bit. But since you're not doing a ton of high intensity, not a ton of intervals, your cardio level isn't going to increase all that much. So then you end up having maybe a little bit more to your life bar, but your strength bar is pretty big. So then as long as you're riding at low intensity, you can, for the most part, ride for a pretty long time as long as you're fueling yourself, because you've really kind of honed in on that strength. Now let's take this same idea and push it out 5 years. 5 years of riding, not too much in groups, by yourself, big rides like 3, 4, 5, 6 hour rides where you're just grinding at 60 to 70 RPMs, which a lot of guys do. This is gonna put you in a place where, again, your skill hasn't really been increased that much. And so as you start to ride, you can't rely on that a whole lot. Your strength is through the roof. You're super strong at low intensity. Your cardio still hasn't improved a lot, and your life bar is pretty decent now after 5 years of riding. So with a fitness profile of something like this is a guy who's century, double century. This is a guy that will go out and do 200 miles at a decent pace because he's never going to really go into that intensity. But if he tried to go into a race, a full-on race, like a 1 hour high-intensity race, and you switched his little intensity over, and all of a sudden he's draining his cardio, even though all that strength is there, you're just you don't have much to bank on. Now you're dipping into your health bar here, and even though you have all that strength, it doesn't necessarily count for much at that high intensity because you're blowing up. Okay, so let's reset this now and kind of go more down like a racer's path. Someone who gets started, and in the first 30 days, they have a very similar experience, right? They have no experience, they have no strength, they have no cardio, and very little life bar. And so no matter what you do, within the first 30 miles, your legs are burning, your lungs are burning, you're dead. But over the next year, you start to ride with groups, and you start to feel out pace lines, and maybe you even do some race style kind of group rides. Your skill level is going to increase because your skill is actually being utilized, being able to stay on someone's wheel, soft pedaling so that you can recover, and also just pedal technique to really get out a lot of power. So your skill increases, but your strength isn't going to increase as much as you would like because you're probably all based on upper end. You're doing a lot of high intensity stuff. And even though high intensity does help out with strength, what's going to end up happening is you're going to do these short 1 hour rides, maybe 1.5 hour rides, and they're super duper intense. And so then you're kind of blown and you don't want to keep going. So your 2, 3, 4, 5 hour rides aren't really there. So your strength does increase, your cardio increases quite a bit. So you have a lot more to hang on that. And so your intensity switch here, if you've got it on to intensity, you're able to exist for a lot longer inside that high intensity area before you dip into your life bar. So let's take this out over 5 years, and for the most part, your strength will increase just because you're riding over 5 years. Your cardio will have increased quite a bit, your bar, but still your strength is probably less than your cardio, and your skill level has increased quite a bit. But what's weird about this type of profile, and I would say I've been in this profile more than I have anything else, is that when you go out and do these really long group rides that aren't really at intensity, they're not super high intensity, you just don't have that motor to utilize. You don't have that strength bar to exhaust. So then you'll be around guys that you could blow their doors off in a 1 hour race, but 5 hours into a ride, and you're just like, I'm done, man. I'm smoked because your strength bar has depleted, and now you're eating into your willingness to suffer, your overall health bar. And once that's done, you're done, man. It doesn't matter that you have such a high-end cardio. You know what I mean? If you're not going intensity, you're not really utilizing that strength. Now you get to use your, this is so confusing. Now you can use your skill level quite a bit to get you a long way, but there's still a pretty good sized hole in your overall fitness. So what would probably be the best way to develop your fitness over time? You're gonna have to start at zero, okay? It's just, you're starting somewhere. But to sort of break up your year into two different factions, two different groups, periodization. And so one part of that year is focused a lot on strength and endurance and building that strength bar up. And then the other half of the year, or another part of the year, depending on where you live, is going to be used to increase your cardio and your skill, which this means getting out there with big groups, going a little bit above your pay grade, riding with guys that are blowing your doors off, overreach, so that you can kind of get this, your cardio is increasing, your strength is increasing, your skill level is increasing, all bars are increasing. And so let's say over a 5-year period, you have a wide range of tools in your toolbox to lean on. You have your skill to lean on. You have your strength to lean on. You have your cardio, your high-end cardio to lean on, and you have your overall just willingness to suffer to lean on. This is going to give you a great, well-rounded fitness profile. But that means stepping outside of your comfort zone. That means that if you only like to race and you only like to do 1-hour little efforts, like me, I much enjoy that, but I have to get out there and I gotta do big rides often, more often than I do. I have to race my strength, ride my strength, train my weakness, which is long endurance rides. That's probably one of my biggest weaknesses. If you just stay away from your weakness, then you're never really going to develop it. You're never really going to have an overall profile. And then, you're not going to be complete as a cyclist. Okay, last thing. I know this has kind of just been an overkill of graphics, and I hope that you're still with me. But your development of your power profile based on your muscle type. There's fast twitch, there's slow twitch. It's a thing, it's science. Some people have fast twitch, some people have slow twitch. Sprinters, pure sprinters, have more fast twitch muscle that is going to be much more responsive and strong, but burn out. Doesn't have much endurance. Other athletes are going to have maybe more endurance. So they can't snap really fast, but man, they can produce power for a really long time. Now you can train one muscle or the other muscle, but for the most part, you're genetically going to start off leaning one way or the other. And so depending on that, your power profile might develop in a really weird way. My power profile is kind of just medium, right? I would say, I guess I probably have much closer to a 50-50 of fast and slow, probably more on the slow. But so my high-end power, the most power I've ever put out is 1,440 watts. And then you can kind of see my power curve just slopes off. I would say this is pretty normal, pretty average for what I can do for 1 second and what I can do for an hour. But if you have a lot of slow twitch, you might not ever be able to hit 1,000+ watts. It might just not be something that your body is capable of doing. You can train towards it, definitely, but you might over time have something like a much less steep curve. Phil Guyman, when I was looking at some of his power numbers when I did some of his numbers, or did his videos, his 1 minute power and his 1 hour power are not that much different. It's very flat. His fast twitch, his full-on out sprint maybe isn't that amazing, but the fact that he can hold dang near, 50% of his 1 minute power for an hour is crazy. Now let's take this other guy that I know that I ride with, a fellow vegan cyclist, Tomas. Dude, the guy has 2,400 watt max power. Unreal max power. This guy is the definition of fast twitch, because if you look at his power profile, it's like the difference between his 1 second and his 1 hour is so sharp, right? And look, we're not all like this guy, but to know and to understand, this dude needs to just sit in, and sprint, because there's just no way he's gonna dominate anyone with a 250 watt max 1 hour power. But dude, there's no possible way I'm gonna out sprint him with my measly 1200 watt max to his 20, like literally doing double my max watts. Crazy. So over his time, if he started out like low, as he started to progress through cycling, his 1 minute to 1 second increased much higher than the rest of his profile. Versus like someone like Phil Guyman, everything kind of sorts to come up pretty evenly. Don't pigeonhole yourself into saying I'm a pure sprinter, I'm a pure climber, I'm a pure whatever. For the most part, a lot of us just need to get out and ride and try to have an overall well-rounded fitness. It will be better for us as cyclists, and we can enjoy it and get more out of it. I'm gonna leave you on one little note, which is people are asking like, why even train? Like, why do this? Why don't you just go out and enjoy the ride? And the thing is, dude, if you're fit, you will enjoy the ride way more. The fact that I can ride 60 miles at a decent pace to go see the world's largest tree. Forget about it, it's the most biggest tree ever. And like, never even feel fatigued? Get back in the car and feel great? I mean, that's amazing. So, stress those metrics, be well-rounded, and as always, vegan cyclist. Yeah.